Coming up next, the Bookening reads Richard III Second. Hey everybody, it's Nathan. Didn't remember what play we're doing. We're not doing the Hunchbacked
of Notre Dame.
No, it's not even a play.
Hunchbacked of Notre Dame.
The Hunchbacked of Notre Dame. You guys have never. You know what? Fun fact: cannot stand Victor Hugo. Have a lot of trouble reading that guy.
Hey, fun fact. Me too.
Me too. Hashtag me too.
Yeah.
There you go, Jake. Your thoughts?
That's a weird connection to make. I've never read Victor Hugo. I didn't mind the Disney movie back in the day, though.
Yeah, Disney movie was cool.
We'll have to try him one day.
I've
actually never been able to make it through Les Mis.
I've never been able to make it through Les Mis
or whatever. He's a bad man.
He is a bad man. That Frollo. And I don't care for him at all.
Can we go to the cast of characters?
How do you guys feel about
King Richard II?
King Richard II.
Ah, yes.
Good or bad man?
I was going to ask you about Quasi and Moto, the two talking gargoyles from the Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Was that their name?
Pretty sure.
No
Pretty sure.
way.
They were named after Quasimodo?
Well, okay. That's what Google's for, I guess.
Yeah.
Jason Alexander in Hunchback of Notre.
I would look on my phone, but you banned me from using my phone.
I did.
We got banned from using our phones because Nathan...
He's a really small, petty sort of guy when it comes to this sort of thing. That's what I've noticed.
I'm actually a big petty guy. But what are you going to do? Hugo. It's Victor and Hugo, actually, are the name of the comic relief gargoyles that we all know and love from Victor Hugo's classic. I guess it wouldn't be Quasi and Moto. That'd be weird if they were Quasimodo's friends.
You remembered there was a thing.
I remember there was a thing, yeah, because I like to remember when the Disney Corporation wants to make cute Happy Meals out of a story about whatever the Hunchback of Notre Dame is about. Guys, that's not what we're talking about, and I haven't even said who we are. My name is Nathan Alberson, humble and obedient host. H and O.
So very H and so very O.
H no H. Humble and obedient host. Brandon, you are so fat.
Thank you.
No, you're not. You're moderately fat. It's Brandon Chastain. He's arguably in better shape than I am. Yet I use the power of people's imaginations against him.
Yes.
But this is really a podcast about the power of imagination. So that's why we do it. And it illustrates the point. And he's Brandon Chastain. And he's the scholar who's a baller of reading.
Does it illustrate?
That you're fat, I guess.
Okay, thank you.
That when you're the host of a podcast, you can abuse your... Hey, it's Jacob Menzel.
The fattest of all of us.
That big fat slob. Jake Menzel. Wow, are the powers of imagination so great that we could make people think you're fat, Jake? Because, spoiler alert, he's actually pretty not fat.
No, he's in good shape. But we could use people's imaginations, make them think.
We can try.
You know what? Let's put a wart on his head. Hey, Brandon, what do you think about the old wart on Sir Wartzelot over there?
It's pretty distracting.
It's really distracting.
Especially that hair that comes out of the middle of it.
The hair that comes out right out of the middle of it.
Right.
The hair comes out of the middle of the wart?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just one hair.
Yeah. You want to just pull the wart off.
Confusing warts and moles, I think.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Mole is a furry little creature that digs holes.
Yeah.
And a wart is
and
the name of the guy in sort of the
Okay, okay.
So,
on the count of three, you guys are both going to say exactly where this mole is.
okay.
1, 2, 3.
Jake's face.
Yeah, the left side of his face.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We could probably narrow it down.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3. Forehead. That's how me and Brendan talk when we both have to say an obvious piece of information that we know. Guys, I think the new listeners are probably gone. So
we can get into it.
We can get into it. Richard II by Shakespeare. Old Billy S. Brandon, any context we need to know about this particular PLAY?
Outside of what we already did last episode?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we can remind people where this falls. This is in his second period in the mid-1590s. This would have been when he was becoming an established playwright before his final period when he would do all the major tragedies. And so Much Ado About Nothing, other plays like that. This was what he was writing during this period. One of the distinguishing marks of this play is that it's written entirely in poetic meter and blank verse.
As opposed to what? Isn't Shakespeare all poetry, Brandon?
No, as opposed to rhyming couplets. And so a lot of the poems, like guys like Thomas Kidd and Chris Marlowe, would have written mainly in rhyming couplets, especially heroic couplets, where it was iambic pentameter, and each line would rhyme, and you'd have 2 rhymes, then you go on to the next rhyme, and Shakespeare doesn't really do this, except in some notable exceptions in this play. Like when Henry takes the throne, he starts to rhyme. But to that point, he didn't.
But you said it's all poetry.
It is all poetry because it's blank verse in the sense, so it's poetry in the sense that every line is divided into 10 syllables, and those syllables are then further divided into 5 feet, and each foot consists of 2 syllables. And that syllable's called an iamb, or that foot's called an iamb because the foot is made up of a unstressed syllable and then a stressed syllable, and that's called an iamb. So da-da, da-da. That is, so if we read actually a passage, I can pull up one here for you. You can hear it. Old John of Gaunt, time-honored Lancaster. You hear it? Hast thou, according to thy oath and band, brought hither Henry Hereford, thy bold son, here to make good the boisterous late appeal. And so there's a little bit of alteration to make it interesting in the meter there, but which then our leisure would not let us hear. So you can hear the stress, unstress, and of course you're not supposed to say it like that, but that's just making it so people can really hear it.
Right.
But also the lines at the end are not rhyming. And so you have the iambic pentameter, but he got rid of the rhyme so that it sounded more like natural speech, but still lofty.
That's like an innovation of Shakespeare's?
It was an innovation of Shakespeare's to at least use this predominantly throughout his plays. And then, like, if you look throughout a lot of the lines that... So you'll have someone who might say something and it'll be 4 syllables, so the next person will respond and it might be 6 syllables. But together they create the iambic pentameter line.
Right. So what would a non-poetic line in another Shakespeare play sound like?
Well, nobody has a copy of Romeo and Juliet on them, do they?
I do not.
Let's see, we can find... Biggest distinguisher is going to be that iambic pentameter, blank verse will be more for the noble. More for the tragic figures in later tragedy, and anytime you have lower class people enter. So think Midsummer's Night Dream.
Bottom and his friends.
Bottom and his friends, they're going to be speaking just in direct prose.
Right.
They're not going to have blank verse. That's because, the blank verse sounds a bit less...
Sounds more regal.
Sounds more regal, that's what I'm thinking, as I'm trying to find
more formal.
Example from, here we go, Romeo and Juliet.
More elevated.
More elevated. All right, here's the nurse speaking. Well, sir, my mistress is the sweetest lady. Lord, when 'twas a little prating thing. Oh, there is a nobleman in town, one Paris, that would fain lay knife aboard, but she, good soul, had as lief see a toad, a very toad to see him. It's just less formal.
Just talking. There you go. And this play primarily, almost entirely concerns itself with the noble people, and they all speak in poetry.
Yes, and so you get none of the prose relief that you get with some of the other plays. This is all very high speech, very formal, and you can feel it with this play. This is one of the more serious plays, even looking at some of the later tragedies, like with Lear, you had at least the Fool.
Right. Hamlet, you have the grave digger.
Yeah, and so you get those moments of relief from the tension, but here it's pretty escalated the whole play.
Right.
So in some ways, I think that probably makes this a less mature play.
Less mature, but more fun? Maybe. I don't know.
Maybe.
It was more fun for me than this was probably the most fun I've had with Shakespeare so far on the
So this
Bookening.
is your favorite Shakespeare play?
Well, Brandon, that's not what I said.
It's the most fun you've had with Shakespeare.
Yeah, no, this is not my favorite Shakespeare play. Come on. But this is the most fun I've had with Shakespeare on the Bookening. This is the most I've just enjoyed myself watching a Shakespeare play. And I think some of that...
Which is to say that you really enjoyed a performance more than a play, though, right?
I think so, although we watched a good Macbeth with Patrick Stewart. Yeah. We also watched a crummy Macbeth with, what's-his-face, Fassbender.
Yeah.
But I think we've watched some good Shakespeare performances, but I think I do like this play quite a bit. I like the linear nature of it. I like that it's simple. I like that there's a handful of things that happen.
Well, and Richard II's an interesting character.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah.
And Shakespeare does some interesting things with him.
Yes, he does, and we'll talk about that.
But also, I really think that, I mean, I didn't watch any other adaptations of. I think this is the first Richard II that I've ever seen,
Yes, I think it's for me too.
and it's thus far the only Richard II that I've ever seen. But as I watched it, I kept imagining how many versions of Richard II out there are played like a schizophrenic.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That has to be true.
Have we should say we watched The Hollow Crown.
Oh,
I don't.
We might not have said that.
I don't think we've said that. So we watched The Hollow Crown, people.
Yeah.
By the British Broadcasting Company or Corporation, whatever it is, the BBC. And yeah, it's the one that Sam Mendes produced, and we watched the first season, and we specifically, apropos our purposes today, watched Richard II, starring Ben Whishaw. You may know him as Q in the new...
Is that how you say his name?
Whishaw? The guy that plays Q in the new James Bond movies and played Mr. Poppins and Penguins. No, what am I saying?
Mary Poppins Returns.
He played Michael Banks.
Yes, he played Michael Banks.
In Mary Poppins Returns.
And he was pretty good. The movie was
He's in
less
Paddington,
good than him.
I think.
He is Paddington. He is the bear.
He's the bear.
He's the bear.
And those are pretty good movies.
Those are good movies all except for Mary Poppins Returns.
Which Nathan did not like.
I did not like it.
I also didn't like it.
Holding out for Mary Poppins Forever and Mary Poppins and Robin. Mary Poppins Begins. I can do this all. Actually, that's probably the last thing that I can do that with. That's the last Batman title that I can swap out Mary Poppins with.
Really?
Yep. Because The Dark Knight.
Well, I don't mean.
I guess
Mary Poppins Rises.
Mary Poppins v Superman: Dawn of Justice.
You do Mary Poppins Rises.
Mary Poppins Rises? No, but that was The Dark Knight.
Oh.
It'd be the White Witch Rises.
The White Witch Rises.
The White Witch Rises.
Which would be cool. We'll talk about that in our Narnia series. Yeah, so we watched this BBC version, and it was fantastic, right?
Yeah, it was really great.
It was great.
What is there to say about it? I don't know.
I mean, what I was alluding to, I guess I should just explain.
Right.
For the listener. Ben Whishaw, I don't know how to say his name.
Let's go with Whishaw for the purposes of the podcast.
Good, that's how I
think that's correct,
it, yeah. Ben Whishaw plays Richard, and what he does is he gives us a Richard that is completely effete and debauched, but also is full of pathos and able to have real dignity and grace in the moments where he needs it. And he pulls together this very sad but realistic character who's able to deliver these big grand speeches and also play this debauched king that really does need to be deposed.
Right.
But also it's sad. And he does have a claim to the throne. And he's going to be voicing some real tragic things as he goes about it. Pulls it all together, and it doesn't feel schizophrenic at all. It feels like it's all of a piece, and it's just a really, really brilliant performance. Makes you wonder why the guy only ever plays a stuffed bear or a
foppish kind of.
I want to see him in more complex roles. You know,
he'll be playing Uriah Heep in the new David Copperfield.
Yeah, I heard about that. That's interesting. Uriah Heep, hard character to play, easy character to make slimy and over the top and like unbelievable.
But that's the kind of challenge that you would think that Ben Whishaw would be up for. That Richard II would be the kind of character that would be really easy to play as a slimy, gross person who then couldn't really pull off the kind of tragic speeches with the dignity and grace that you want them to, or would be a poser or he would just have to be schizophrenic, or really uniting those aspects of that character in one seamless character. It just seems like a really brutal challenge.
Right. Well, and that's my constant complaint, or not complaint, but just observation when we do Shakespeare. I do not understand. Just Shakespeare. Everybody always says Shakespeare's the great psychologist. He had every person that ever lives has a Shakespeare character that's like, and I think that that's true. And yet, when I tackle some of the big things like Macbeth, I'm like, how is this supposed to track? How did Shakespeare intend for it to track? It's not clear. Like one moment he's this really powerful, regal guy, and then Macbeth's kind of a thug at a certain point, and you get it. You get the big picture trajectory. Each moment lands, but the connective tissue sometimes Shakespeare just maybe didn't bother with. I don't know, or maybe it's the performer's
supposed certainly the idea of psychological realism is very different, than our idea of psychological realism, where we expect to track with a character's emotional arc point by point by point by point by point by point by point, and it's all needs to be spelled out for us. And Shakespeare will just jump. And Richard clearly is one of those plays that in lesser hands would have felt really disconnected and schizophrenic, I think.
Yeah.
And that was the marvel of watching this performance as my first experience of this play. Watching Wishaw pull this all together, have it feel completely psychologically real.
Right.
It makes sense. And also know that he's walking, like to be able to see that he's walking on a knife's edge. That the real joy of the play for me was watching him dance on the knife's edge and not slip.
Well, I thought I've watched it twice now, and what I noticed this time was he does something really clever, which is early on he observes himself as he does some of the lines. He'll sort of give this self-satisfied little laugh or give a look. There's certain lines. There's a line, I wrote some of it down. Forget, forgive, conclude, and be agreed. Our doctors say this is no month to bleed. He delivers that, and then he's just like
pleased with himself.
He gives a little chuckle, right? And you could say that that's over the top, but what it really does is it creates this effete character who enjoys the performance aspect of being the king, right? Who likes to be florid, and indeed who seems to be stuck being florid. He's one of those people that would rather talk than act, which is, I'm sure, what people say about the character, because the more he's trapped, the more florid and over the top and poetic his language gets. But Ben Whishaw really sets that up nicely by seeming to be amused early on by the things that he says and by the clever little lines that he's given.
And then all he has to do is lose himself a little bit.
Right.
Be hit with real tragedy and grief and forget himself.
Right.
Yeah. That is clever sleight of that's really clever. I hadn't processed it that way, but the minute you say that, I'm remembering, that's exactly right.
Yeah, well, it's especially evident in the beach scene. It's a beach in them. I don't remember whether it's actually set on a beach in Shakespeare, but in the movie it is, where he finds out he's basically been deposed, and he starts out giving this long speech.
The coast of Wells, the castle.
That is
that's a brilliant piece of acting.
Yeah,
and he's able to be arrogant at the beginning and say, it's my divine right to be a king, and then he's in despair and making all his followers crazily sit down on the beach with him so that they can be all existential and mopey by the end of it. And he manages to pack all that in and make it not feel hashtag schizophrenic, which is a neat trick. But I think because he's been given these kind of cues where playing the part a little bit, you kind of understand that this person is florid, and when he breaks in a florid way. But
what was really shallow and superficial suddenly becomes real.
Right.
But it feels like the same guy.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Who's been hit with something hard.
Right. He did a good job.
Yeah, he did a great job. Sorry, I'm looking at this. So one thing that I think that Wishaw really captures well, like you guys were saying, but is this tension that King Richard, I think, is or Shakespeare is using King Richard to portray the difficulty of having to be this person who's supposed to be the body of the king, but also the body of the nation.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so you have your own self, but then you also, that self is supposed to represent England.
Right.
And so a lot of some of the interesting imagery they used in this performance, I'm not saying that Shakespeare said to do it this way, but they use a lot of the gold colors and stuff that especially would be used to portray Elizabeth later in her sort of regalness. People talk a lot about, or critics talk a lot about, how Shakespeare, even when he's trying to praise Elizabeth, still finds ways to criticize her, and using this to show that tension that she must have also been under.
Right.
Because there's an amazing scene in the Hollow Crown, and it's where he comes out on top of that castle,
right?
And he's dressed.
Yep.
Yeah.
Very similar to what Elizabeth would be like. I can't remember the exact outfit he was wearing.
Whites and golds.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he's trying to look like an icon, basically.
Right. Yeah.
It's this kingly icon that's up there. And when they see him, they say, "See, King Richard doth himself appear as doth the blushing, discontented sun from out the fiery portal of the east." And so those are the colors they choose for him. Then also there's the amazing scene where they go into his tent, and it's all these golds and stuff, and there's the monkey for some reason.
The monkey's just watching.
And so it gives this sense of the Orient or the East, which was smart on their part, because in that time that would have represented mystery and also lavishness at the same time. And so here he is, and also kind of an element of paganism as well, because here's this guy pretending to be a deity. What's interesting about Richard II, and I think it's there, but what's great about Shakespeare, and when you watch it performed with a great actor, is that they can pick up on these things that you haven't noticed before. And so I think a
great actor and a great director.
Yeah. That's right. The director and actor here, they picked up on this sense that Richard really is unable to deal with that idea of the king representing something more than himself, and so that it goes to his head and makes him mad, and he's like poeticizing it and making it into this metaphor that he doesn't know how to deal with. And it's like what happens if someone who should have probably been an artist or a poet becomes king. And it drives them bonkers.
Well, I actually found him, at least as Wishaw played, I think as Shakespeare wrote him, I found him pretty relatable, actually. And just as I couldn't help but process it as a new husband. Anytime I've had to bear any kind of an authority in my life, I don't know, it has a lot of wisdom. It gets at some stuff. Like he doesn't want to choose between these two guys. He wants to let them both off the hook, and then when they won't let him, he punishes them both. And that to me does not feel like one of those arbitrary setups that often happen in Much Ado, like in Shakespeare, Much Ado, but well, you can't marry her or you'll die. It's like, well, this is the plot point we needed to get things going. That to me feels really like, I get it. I get why he did it. And it's a crummy decision, but it's the kind of crummy decision that I've had bosses make for me and I've resented, and the kind of crummy decision that I'm tempted to make, where you're like, I don't actually want to have to choose a side. And so I'm going to try and play both sides, and it just does not work.
It's the dangers of weakness
right.
and effeminacy. I thought that was an interesting way that Shakespeare set up that tension, or the central fight between the two guys. What was the other guy you had? Bolingbroke and York, Thomas Mowbray.
Yeah. Well, and one thing that the movie excluded, which is an interesting choice that kind of changes the play a little bit, is they're all talking around the fact that Richard II actually had somebody killed. Maybe it's Mowbray's father.
Yeah, so Richard is always or at least trying to act like he's this great king, and he even has the air and the dignity of what we would expect a great king to have.
Right.
And yet then he's disconnected from his people. He's not really a ruler. He doesn't really make good decisions. And then when he does make decisions, they're often selfish, or like what he does with John of Gaunt after he dies.
Right.
It makes Bolingbroke mad. He goes and he just takes everything. And so he is a tyrant in that sense. But what's really, it's also, I'm sure we're going to talk about this, what makes this play interesting is that even though he is a tyrant, it's still, you still don't feel that what Bolingbroke does is right.
Right. Well, that's an interesting thing, because I researched it a little bit, and most modern scholarship paints Bolingbroke as a Machiavellian schemer who, from page 1 of this play, intends the throne for himself, wants to get rid of Richard, just doesn't want the blood on his hands. So he's playing it really cool, and he's making all these speeches about bending the knee every chance he gets, but actually the only thing that he wants is the crown. It's actually more in line with the way that you would think of Jeremy Irons portraying the character in the second of the Hollow Crown. The guy leaves it really ambivalent who plays it in this particular version. Like, he always kind of looks like he doesn't want it. And the text allows for that. I don't think you have to read Bolingbroke as a schemer. And I kind of liked the way that they did it for this performance.
I really liked it.
Oh, I love that guy. I was actually disappointed when they replaced him with Jeremy Irons, which is a neat trick. If you can be disappointed with Jeremy Irons, but that says something about that guy. But it's really unclear. It's really fascinating. Like, when they have their final confrontation in the castle there, when Richard shows up, he says all these things about how he's going to bow to Bolingbroke, and Bolingbroke says, no, I'm going to bow to you. And then Richard is taken away to the tower, but Bolingbroke never really pulls the trigger on it. Like, you never hear him say, I checked the play to make sure this matched up with the movie. He never just takes the horse by the reins and says, we are going to put Richard in prison. We are going to have him killed. And yet everything keeps going his way for him to be king. The way the actor played it, he left it open / almost nudged it towards thinking the guy really just wanted to redress some wrongs and ended up being pushed onto the throne.
Yeah, and maybe felt a little torn about it. Maybe felt like on the one hand he shouldn't do this, and on the other hand it was his responsibility to do it.
Right.
To take it, receive it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just more fun when there's ambiguity and those kinds of things, maybe. I don't know. I definitely think there is a kind of person that wants to do the right thing, wants to honor the God-given authorities, wants to address wrongs and strive for what's just and good, and things do tend to naturally fall that guy's way. It's sort of what King David does. And,
right. I was reminded of King David quite a bit.
Right. David's not going to usurp Saul, but he is going to be out on the borderlands protecting people.
Yeah.
And all of that's going to accrue in terms of goodwill to David and help set up and make it possible for everybody to want to crown David. Like David's being the king that Saul should be,
right,
while refusing to usurp Saul. And yet that in and of itself is in God's providence its own sort of usurpation.
Right.
Like it is its own subversion simply by being a good and righteous man who loves the people, honors the king, and is out doing the work of protecting the people and plundering the Philistines. Like that all accrues to David, and it comes back to him in the end. And then you find David being in a similar situation
with Absalom.
Well, even before Absalom, right? You know, the guy comes back and is going to boast of Saul being killed in battle.
Right.
And David's, on the one hand, this is David's enemy who's tried to kill David many times. And this is a relief to everybody in the court, including David himself.
Right.
For David to pretend like it wasn't something of a relief, I think would be wrong, but he's still going to grieve and mourn over it. And when the guy claims
he has him executed,
that dude's dead.
Right.
How dare you touch the Lord's anointed? And Shakespeare's obviously playing with that sort of thing here with Bolingbroke. He is setting it up to look and feel sort of that way. We could spend a lot of time drawing connections between Richard and Saul and David and Bolingbroke.
Oh, absolutely.
And that is 100% intentional, I think, and it is going to have to be. But David, that kind of thing does continue with David, right? Things, Absalom takes over, David leaves the city. Shimei is cursing him. David doesn't want to punish Shimei. David just wants to submit to the Lord's discipline. They get the fights to go into battle. Don't touch Absalom. And yet, Absalom has to die. And then Joab kills Absalom. And then David's mourning, and it sets everybody, like, wait, isn't this what we wanted to happen? Those kinds of things happen. You know, you feel bad for Saul, but then he is the bad guy.
Right.
And you love Saul and you feel sympathy for Saul, and he was the first king. He was in a hard position, but he's still the bad guy by the end of the story.
Mm-hmm.
David is the good guy. It is a shift from one king to the next king. Saul was king by divine right, and so was David. David was anointed king while Saul was still reigning by divine right. It's complicated and it's messy. And I think oversimplifying that and turning it into a Machiavellian power play on Bolingbroke's part is probably to really misread what Shakespeare was doing and to misread what was inspiring him in terms of what he was working with. I think that this performance probably really actually gets it right.
I think so too.
I think I just talked myself into it.
Right. Well, I think it's a very tricky thing to talk about, but I think people have to understand that in the real world, and indeed in the world as God ordered it, respect, obedience, and subversion can actually all exist at the same time in the same person. And it's a really complicated, tricky thing to have to talk about. And I don't want to make space for our listeners to go and be rebellious. But if anyone's ever, for example, been in a job where the big boss says, here's the vision for the company, here's what we're going to do, and then the middle manager says, we're going to do this, and that actually contradicts what the big boss says, Who do you obey? I've been in those situations. You guys have probably both been in these situations in your lives. And I'm sure some of our listeners have. And what you'll find is you end up respecting the company, respecting the boss, obeying the boss, and subverting the rules all at the same time. And it's complicated. I'm sure there's some people thinking, well, that sounds like Nathan just doesn't like authority. But no, that's not really what I'm talking about. I'm not making space for rebellion here. I'm making space for the fact that God puts us under certain dispensations of authority, be it our husbands, our fathers, our pastors, our bosses, asks us to respect them, asks us to love them, asks us to obey them, and then asks us to be wise.
Well, I mean, the fact is, there's a long tradition in American civil politics of understanding certain forms of
disobedience,
of civil disobedience as part of the process of being a good citizen. It's deeply rooted in, and people abuse this all the time.
Sure.
But it's deeply rooted in the DNA of America, that you have an obligation to the authorities above you to reject their unjust laws.
Right.
Especially when they're spending all their money on gold tints and monkeys and then taking the money from recently deceased noblemen unfairly without
and their
cause.
Whole families, yeah.
So, and potentially murdering someone else's, which is an aspect, like you said, was kept out of this. But yeah, I think that there's enough haunting Richard II, which is interesting because then the death of Richard II, the way he dies, will go on to haunt the rest of some of the Henry plays as well.
Right.
This doesn't go away.
Well, that's the additional layer of complication that we could add to what we were just talking about, which is you sometimes respect, obedience, and subversion will all exist, all in some sense feel necessary, and then God will still discipline you for the elements, the subversion. And it's just complicated, and I think only God can sort it out. To take a step back, in case people still don't know what we're talking about, I just thought of a really blatant, stupid example. But let's just say dad's a good dad. He gets drunk one night. He's going to beat the little kid. His wife says, "No, don't beat the little kid. I'm going to stop you. I'm going to call the police." This is a very simple example of someone subverting someone's immediate authority in order to uphold the higher standard of their actual authority. And I think the wife could properly say in that circumstance, "I'm obeying you, big picture, even though you're
honoring my husband by not allowing him to do this wicked thing."
Yeah, I am honoring the position that is my husband. Obviously, there's all kinds of ways to abuse this, but it is something that people under authority find themselves having to do. And so when Bolingbroke, for example, says, "I'm executing these two guys," which, what is it, like Baggy and Greenberg or something like that?
Bushy.
Bushy
and Green.
Bushy and Green. I'm gonna have these guys killed. And we all know it serves Bolingbroke's purposes to have these guys killed. But he gives a speech about how he's doing it in honor and to protect the interests of Richard II. And I believe that both things can be true and probably would be of a character like that. If Bolingbroke's the man that I take him for, the man that I think Shakespeare wrote and that this actor performed, I think both things are happening. And I think
it's definitely the way you feel in the performance.
Yeah.
Is that it's not completely unjust that these guys are losing their heads.
No,
it's more than just. These guys are in fact
leeches on the king.
They're corruptors of the king.
Right. And in a sense, Bolingbroke, you could say, is obeying the man that the king should be.
They're like Wormtongue.
Yeah.
Get rid of Wormtongue, man.
Yeah, should have killed Wormtongue.
We're not going to answer the question of should they kill. We're not going to address that until y'all get us up to $1,000 a month, and we
get to dress up as swans.
Get to dress up as swans and do an entire episode talking about Tolkien's justice.
Yeah.
I think the other thing you have to understand about this is that I think a lot of modern readers may take it for granted that Shakespeare doesn't, or that one shouldn't believe in the divine right or appointment of kings. But the backdrop for all of this is that Shakespeare and his, I was going to say listeners, because that's who listens to us, but Shakespeare and his playgoers would have very much understood that their monarch was appointed by God, was a bit of a god herself or something like that, right, Brandon?
Yeah, the idea would have been that you have, so I mentioned before, you have the body of the king, then you have the body politic, and that in the body of the king, or the queen in her case, she had basically the spirit of England, was one way of looking at it, within her, and that she was to be a living representative of England while on earth. And so she would have had this almost divine status. Mm-hmm. It wasn't the same as like an emperor who was a literal deity.
Right. But
they were supposed to have this extraordinary symbolic weight on them. And so, have you ever seen the movie Elizabeth?
The Kate Blanchett thing, yeah.
Yeah, they capture this moment really wonderfully where she has to establish her authority, and so the way she chooses to do it is she comes with that huge white ruffle, and then her face is painted completely white, and she's like in this gold outfit, and that's a famous moment in history because here she chooses to establish herself as like the living symbol of England on earth.
Right.
As the communication between God's authority given to the queen and then the people.
You don't just depose it, right? Like it's
you don't just depose it. Yeah,
it's not. You don't just elect.
Track of the question.
Yeah, sorry. You don't just elect a new one. Like
no, that's right. You don't just elect a new one, and that's why lineage was so important because what mattered was the family that had been given this authority more than you can't just take it for yourself.
Right.
This is something that has to be vested by the state. This is something we don't see in America
or by the church.
Or by the church. Yeah. We don't feel that in America because that's not how our politics work.
Right.
But you still see that weight in things like there's that new show about Victoria, right? Or there's also one about Queen Elizabeth II. The weight of having to take that authority on themselves and the whole coronation, the symbolism involved with that, the heavy weight of it, the ceremonial ritual of it. Yeah, it's what C.S. Lewis talks about in his essay on the epics when he says solemne, that solemnity that's full of meaning. So yeah, you don't just depose it.
No.
If you do just depose it, then yeah.
You do it with fear and trembling, which is at the very least what Bolingbroke presents, what he has to present to people, however you want to read him, is that I'm not doing this lightly. And
Yeah, because he knows that
it's not just because I have a personal beef.
he can't just make himself the symbolic representation of England.
Right.
He's not going to have that weight, and he becomes Henry the Fourth. Yeah. Even then, he has some trouble, like trying to still. It's not like Henry V kind of has that because now he's a Henry,
right,
in the lineage of Henrys. But Henry Bolingbroke is always going to have some of that doubt throughout his reign, and he kind of just has to take it and establish himself that way. Which is interesting that Shakespeare points this out because he's dealing with a house. It was a new sort of established house, anyways, that had a bloody early history, like with Bloody Mary and all that stuff, in Henry VIII, and it was already a house that was unstable. And so Elizabeth was already dealing with that and those sorts of doubts over her throne. So, in other words, Shakespeare wasn't just brown-noser.
Right.
We can say that, right?
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. On a completely unrelated topic, my favorite part of the play this time was this random part between Gaunt, who Patrick Stewart played, and Henry Bolingbroke, where Bolingbroke's being exiled. Gaunt says, "Suppose the singing birds musicians, the grass whereupon thou treadest thy presence strawed, the flowers fair ladies, and thy steps no more than a delightful measure or a dance. For gnarling sorrow hath less power to bite than the man that mocks at it and sets it light." And I was like, that's pretty nice. And then Bolingbroke comes back with, "Oh, who can hold a fire in his hand by thinking on the frosty Caucasus, or cloy the hungry edge of appetite by bare imagination of a feast, or wallow naked in December snow by thinking on fantastic summer's heat? Oh no, the apprehension of the good gives but the greater feeling to the worse." I just thought that was cool because the one character was like, "Just believe it and you'll have it." And then the other character was like, "Nope.
That's not how life works.
That's not how life works, idiot." Which I really enjoyed. I don't know what else you guys want to talk about this play or about this movie. It was a really beautiful movie. It looked like it was Botticelli was like the production designer or something.
Yeah, it was really nicely done.
Nicely done. They did gay it up a little bit with they really went for the effete side of Richard. All his buddies were kind of played by beautiful young dudes, and they had some scenes where he would kind of give someone a knowing glance or put his hand on their shoulder or something like that, which took a little wind out of the sails of the beautiful scene where he has to say goodbye to his wife that's being shipped off to France.
Well, I'm not sure that scene was meant to have much wind in its sails, right?
Was it not?
Well, because of it's interesting that they used effeteness as a weakness of his.
Right.
I don't think they portrayed it as a strength.
No.
I don't even think they portrayed it as he's like unwilling to express his sexuality because he feels repressed.
Right.
It was definitely one of his weaknesses.
And that was a bad thing.
Right.
Yeah. And so he was effete. That was all part of the problem.
Yeah, for that to be...
And Bolingbroke was strong.
Yeah, for that to be something that Sam Mendes, of all people, is willing to... Because he's the American Beauty guy, right?
American Beauty, also Road to Perdition.
Which is good.
Skyfall. And
did you like Road to Perdition?
Yeah, Road to Perdition is good. Sam Mendes is a classicist, I think. He likes, as much as anything, I think he just likes a nice, clean composition.
But the fact that they pulled out the effeteness as a weakness...
The point of contrast. It really is the point of contrast.
Yeah, right.
Between him and Bolingbroke.
Bolingbroke is a man of action who, like, he gets kicked out of the country. He comes back with a giant army. Like,
even down to, I think, some of the symbolism of... So Richard is just going to be a down-to-earth. He's going to be a king, and he's going to have the authority, and he will feel like a king. Richard had to pretend to be a king.
But you mean Bolingbroke?
Bolingbroke did.
He's going to be a king. He's not going to... It's not going to be gold and white.
That's what I meant, yeah.
Who did I say? You said Richard.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, it's not going to be gold and white. He's going to look like a dude.
Yeah.
But he's going to look like a dude that you'd be afraid to meet in battle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But Richard, on the other hand, he has to color himself up. He has to do the weird iconography. Even
the way he moves has to be...
Like, so they had the
set apart
crucifixion statue or icon throughout.
Yeah.
And then when Richard dies, they play up the fact that he has the arrows exactly like
Right.
that figure with the
Like
blood.
it's Saint Sebastian. That
Or
had
Saint Sebastian, yes.
the arrows. Yeah.
Okay, thank
Because
you.
they start with Richard painting a picture, and he's got some guy posing for him that has fake arrows and
yeah.
stuff.
Yes,
and
that's right. So, okay, well, either way, even when he's dying, I don't think they're trying to say that he was another Saint Sebastian.
no.
I think that what the director chose to do there is that's Richard, even in his death, feeling like he has to be this actor of this iconography. Like this is, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like he's playing a part even then in his death.
Well,
So
the incandescent Meredith walked in at the very end of me watching this, and she had 2 comments. The first one was, "Oh man, is everything melodramatic with this guy?" And it was the scene where he was giving away the crown, and of course that scene goes on for like 4 hours, and it's all wonderful, but it just keeps going. Like he's got more, and he's going to insult these guys, and then he's going to look like he's going to finally abdicate, and then he's going to have another big poetic speech. It kept going, and so she said, "Does everything have to be melodrama?" And then she said, "Boy, this guy really likes to think that he's Jesus."
yeah.
And then she walked out of the room. And,
Well, she got him, yeah.
yeah, she got it.
But I think Shakespeare understood that too. So.
I will say I thought they ladled on the Christ imagery a little thick,
They-
especially at the very end when he's lying in his coffin and they pan up and it's to an actual crucifix or something. I'm like, all right, guys, we get it. But that's a very minor criticism of a very great production. I don't know anything else. Patrick Stewart's always fun.
Patrick Stewart he was a great Gaunt.
Yep, he was a great Gaunt.
It's nice when you can cast Patrick Stewart in a film that you'll forget that he's in, not because he did a bad job, but because it was such a minor role. Like I forgot that Patrick Stewart was in this film.
I did not remember it until I watched it again.
I don't remember if I said on mic or not, but watched this thinking we were doing this in August, and
then you guys had to go and make us do Narnia,
Yeah.
and then you had to go and take it away from us.
Maybe you'll go back and give it back to us.
Yeah.
So we'll have to wait another.
anyhow, I was like, oh yeah, you mentioned Patrick Stewart earlier, and it's like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
I forgot he was even in this thing.
And then he dies, and somebody says his tongue now is a stringless instrument, that's what I want on my tombstone. I think that's pretty
Your
cool.
tongue now is a string.
My tongue now is a stringless instrument. That's Shakespeare. He could write a line of dialogue. That's my contention. I don't know how you guys feel about that.
I'm in agreement.
What else? Yeah, it's kind of a simple play, isn't it? Like,
Yeah.
there's Richard and Bolingbroke, and well, okay, there's that weird scene. So there's that kind of out of nowhere scene at the end where the Duke of York's son is traitor, and the Duke of York drags him he gets ahead of the Duke and begs for his life from Henry, and then the Duke of York shows up and says, "Please kill my son. You need to kill my son. He's a traitor." And then Mrs. York shows up and says, "Please don't kill my son. Have I ever begged?" And they just go back and forth. And it's the most rhyme. It's all rhyme. It's like a rap battle or something like that between these 2 characters, one of whom wants their son dead and the other whom wants their son. Why do you guys think Shakespeare wanted to include that?
Because it's really, at the end of the day, all about Bolingbroke's conscience at that moment. And the fact is, what he wanted us to see is that Bolingbroke is uneasy with his conscience about it. Otherwise, he doesn't let the traitor go.
He does let the traitor go, though.
That's why I said otherwise he doesn't let the traitor
Oh,
go.
yeah. Sorry. I misunderstood.
So he lets the traitor go because he's a traitor, or at least he feels like he's a traitor.
He feels like he's a traitor, or he feels like maybe he's a traitor, or he feels
then
like
also-
if he's going to have mercy and live in the sun, then, he had better bestow mercy as well.
Yeah.
Right. He also bestows it on Carlisle, the priest that invokes against him.
It's a nice opening to the parallel to the opening of the play where you had Richard faced with a decision that he had to make, the dispute between 2 people.
Right.
And now you have a dispute and you see that different king, but still same human weakness in the
Right.
king.
They're
But at this-
obviously in parallel to each other.
Yeah, but at
Thank
the
you, Nathan.
at the beginning, it's
They're not like what you said was obvious. I wasn't saying they're obviously in parallel.
blowing that off.
No. I was agreeing with you. I was like, yeah, Brandon, you're right. They are obviously in parallel to each other, as you just said. Anyway, Jake, go ahead.
yeah, except that they're not actually just playing the weakness of both of the guys in perfect parallel. It's an inverse, right? What Richard does is he flippantly punishes, and what Henry does is he shows mercy, which is, if you want to take the Machiavellian standpoint, also maybe a really politically savvy thing to do at that point, to establish the difference between him and Richard, and to establish this is going to be, I am not a tyrant. This is going to be a reign of peace. and I'm a bigger man than this, and therefore you should all be loyal to me. It's more like the difference between Rehoboam and Jeroboam.
Rehoboam says, we should just probably just spell that one out. Rehoboam says, my father whipped you with scourges. I'm going to whip you with scorpions or something like that.
Yeah, that he follows the advice of his stupid young counselors.
Which is exactly what Richard II does, yeah.
And that is the kind of counsel that we see Richard getting is, from his stupid young counselors is, well, raise the taxes, take it away from
John Gaunt died. Let's seize all his stuff. No one will feel bad about that.
Let's do the stuff. Let's take the things. Let's, establish you are the king.
Mm-hmm.
You can do what you want. And then Henry comes and is very much the opposite of that.
Well, Henry, what I loved was a line. I think I put it in my notes here. There's just some dudes talking about Bolingbroke, and they say he paid courtship to the common people. He took off his bonnet to an oyster wench and bowed to a brace of draymen. That says it all. This was a guy that understood that simple kindness is to the people, true condescension, good condescension from a king was going to win him everything.
Yeah.
Yep.
And Richard II, his first
and
line.
that line's actually pretty early on, right?
Yeah, it's around the time when I think it's around the time when we see Richard's buddies telling him to just crush everybody.
Yeah.
I think they may even say about him, like he says, well, how is Richard when
scornfully?
Yeah, like he does this, like he's nice to everyday people, and it's like, well, Richard, maybe you should have learned something there.
Yeah,
buddy. Wouldn't have been # Saint Sebastian. The very first line of Richard, here to make good the boisterous late appeal, which then our leisure would not let us hear. That's what he says when the two men are coming up to get the idea that they brought this dispute before and he was too busy playing.
Yeah.
Which kind of tells you everything you need to know about him. You guys remember the floating crown? There's this weird alien floating crown in this version of the movie.
Oh, there was a floating crown.
There's this random shot where the crown's floating, and there's nothing else quite that stylized, but...
Yeah, I didn't understand why they had that. It's not in Shakespeare's play.
There's not a floating crown?
He doesn't say,
I could totally see there being one.
The crown floating.
Whither doth the crown float?
Because that's how Shakespeare sounded, I'm sure.
Anything else you guys want to say about Richard III?
People should watch it.
Yeah, they should watch it, read it, support it.
You can buy it, the whole first season, these 4 episodes on iTunes or Amazon for I think $10.
Yeah, I want to say
it's a good deal.
Somehow I got mine for $7.99 or something. You do not have to spend a lot of money to watch these.
No,
it's a good deal. And with that, I thoroughly enjoyed this play. I thought it had a lot of wisdom. It was good, and I liked it, and it had some good language in it.
First Shakespeare play that Nathan has liked.
Yeah, I'm going on record. I liked this one. And I always like Shakespeare, except for that Midnight in the Garden of Good or Evil or whatever that thing was called.
Midsummer's Night Dream.
Yeah, didn't care for that.
We could go watch it tonight.
Oh yeah, they're doing a thing in Bloomington. Guys, let's do donor shout outs. We'll alternate. So I'll go to Jake. He'll say it, and then Brandon will say like a Shakespearean thing of awesomeness. And then I'll go to Brandon, and he'll say it, and Jake will say it.
Just like the voice?
Just like the voice. Brandon, Robert and Rhonda the Lovebirds.
Robert and Rhonda the Lovebirds.
Robert and Rhonda the Lovebirds.
That was Shakespearean.
No, you gotta get some Shakespearean awesomeness in there.
Okay. Robert and Rhonda the Lovebirds.
Find the artful Anthony Dodger, Jake.
The artful Anthony Dodger, Jake.
The artful Anthony Dodger. Was that good, Nathan?
Yeah. All right. Ben Wishaw's jealous right now. We should get you to play Richard II. Little Anthony Cigar Store.
Little Anthony Cigar Store.
Little Anthony's Cigar Store.
The Immortal Chelsea E.
The Immortal Chelsea E.
The Immortal Chelsea E.
Jimmy Beam and Little Annie Oakley.
Little
Beam and Little Jimmy
Little Benny Oakley.
Jimmy Beam and Little Annie Oakley.
Lily of the Valley.
Lily of the Valley.
Lily of the Valley.
Andrew and Esther the Lovebirds.
Andrew and Esther the Lovebirds.
Andrew and Esther the Lovebirds.
The Keith Master.
The Keith Master.
The Keith Master.
David's Mighty Men Trucking.
David's Mighty Men Trucking.
David's Mighty Men Trucking.
John and Jill and Little Baby Max.
John and Jill and Little Baby Max.
John and Jill and Little Baby Max.
Jay and Katie who are cold and love cheese.
Jay and Katie who are cold and love cheese, and C.S. Lewis even until we have faces.
Jay and Katie who are cold and love cheese, and C.S. Lewis even till we have faces.
So I made it until.
Until it should be renamed until.
Until we have faces. All right. Beth, the beloved mother of death, has requested that her name be updated.
We have a problem, and the problem is by naming Nathan's beloved mother, Beth, the mother of death, we have made Nathan into death.
And even though he does dress in a black robe every time he hosts.
And carry a scimitar. Or
a scythe. Yeah.
scythe,
And
yeah.
a scimitar.
And a scimitar. I don't know why he has both, yeah.
My face is just a gaunt skeleton.
It's just a dark portal to the underworld.
What are skeleton faces called? A skull. That's the word I'm looking for. My face is a skull.
That's what skeleton face is called.
Beloved Mother Beth, we apologize to you for this bad name choice.
And we will call you Fairy Princess of Wonder and Happiness, Mother Beth.
Fairy Princess of Happiness and Wonder, Mother Beth.
Oh, do I do it? Fairy Princess of Wonder and Happiness, Mother Beth.
Consul Prime Adam.
Consul Prime Adam.
Consul Prime Adam.
Ah, you can feel the rafters shake with Jake's Shakespearean dialect.
I put my heart and soul into all of my performances.
Galactic, it's just the microphone that ruins it somehow. It doesn't translate over the airwaves. Galactic Princess Emily, because Jake is acting his heart out here. People should know.
Did you guys see my performance of Elvish?
That was amazing.
Yeah, that was amazing.
Yeah.
Again, cameras really couldn't capture it. They haven't. You have to develop the camera that can get the nuances of your performance. Galactic Princess Emily.
Galactic Princess Emily.
Hawk! Galactic Princess Emily.
We never knew thee.
We never knew thee. Alas.
We never knew thee.
Alas. Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. Just wait for it.
Jeremy, the dark-hooded Lord of Death.
Jeremy, the dark-hooded Lord of Death.
Jeremy, the dark-hooded Lord of Death.
And, of course, Dark Prince Bear and Princess Bug of Death Doom Die.
And
Dark Prince Bear and Princess
Bug of Death Doom Die.
Bug of Death Doom Die.
Nice.
Nathan, not me?
Nathan, not Nathan.
Nathan, not Nathan.
Maya! Ryan the Red of... Hi, Maya. We need a Shakespeare for Maya.
Maya.
Maya. There we go.
That's so Shakespearean.
Yeah. You should be
way more Shakespearean than my performances.
Ryan the Red Avenger and Judith of the Ladies of Justice.
Ryan the Red Avenger and Judo of the Ladies of Justice.
Judith. Ryan the Red Avenger and Judith of the Ladies of Justice.
Judith.
Oh, I don't want to say Judith.
I apologize for my wife being incapable of saying your guys' name.
What did she say?
She just couldn't get it right.
Ryan the Red Avenger and Judith of the Ladies of Justice. It's easy.
Yeah.
It's very easy.
Yeah, so easy.
Yeah. Ryan the Red Avenger and Judith of the Ladies of Justice. It feels like a vocal warm-up. Ryan the Red Avenger and Judith of the Ladies of Justice. Danny the Dude.
Danny the Dude.
Danny the Dude.
DJ Sammy G.
DJ Sammy G.
DJ Sammy G. Wicca, 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 wicca.
Wicca, wicca.
Drop some of those mad beats, boy.
Danny
By the
and...
pricking of my thumbs. Something wicked.
Wicca. This way comes.
Wicca.
There
This
we
way
go.
comes.
Very nice.
That's good.
Jake can
I'm
give
playing
it a spirit.
along.
Benny and Dana Tiberius.
Benny and Dana Tiberius.
Benny and Dana Tiberius.
Yeah, Eric and Catherine the Lovebirds.
Eric and Catherine the Lovebirds.
Oh, those lovebirds, Eric and Catherine from yon window breaks.
Eric and Catherine from Yon Window Breaks. Maybe that should be their new name. We've already got Lovebirds. I'm officially changing them to Eric and Catherine
From
Yon Window Breaks.
Those window breaks over there. You see them?
You guys have
What's
never
a
been to the
window
window
break?
breaks?
From yon window breaks.
Professor and Lady
That's
X.
the name of the store.
Professor and Lady X.
Professor and Lady X.
Nice.
Lavender's green, Dylan, lavender's blue. Lavender's green, Dylan, I love you too.
Oh, we love you, Dylan.
And the Shakespearean
Let
version?
us count the ways.
Do the ladies do that? Is that?
Yeah, they changed it to that.
I think that was Shakespearean right there.
Yeah.
That's a Mrs. Menzel right there. Lavender's green, Dylan. That's her. Maricheap.
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 Maricheap. All right.
This is very Shakespearean of you.
The Bookening was written and produced by everybody and everything, and it's a great show, and supported at patreon.com/The Bookening. Remember, if you can get us just $11 more, we'll restart our Narnia series. If you can get us
$261
by Halloween, Jake, Brandon, and myself will dress as swans and play trumpets while marching around the courthouse in our fair town of Bloomington. We will take a video. We will march 7 times.
And somewhat less importantly, we will integrate all of Tolkien's oeuvre into 2020.
Right.
Yeah.
Which we're really excited to do. Somewhat even less importantly than that, our nonprofit ministry will have money and we will receive paychecks without having to worry about
the beginning of the next month. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
which would be nice.
Yeah, we like making payroll. So please support us if you like this work. We know there's a lot of people listening out there. If you can't afford to support us, then here's what you do. You pick a friend, any friend, and you send them an email or a text that says, pick an episode that you think this friend would like. You send them an email or text, say, listen to this episode. Maybe Richard II. Maybe your friend is a big Richard II fan.
Yeah.
Maybe they just like Shakespeare.
Lots of those out there.
There are lots of those. Or you go to iTunes, you go to your podcast provider, you leave a 5-star review.
You do?
And it goes a little something like this.
Yeah.
Hey.
Boom. 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 Go, Nathan. Oh, wait. I thought I was dropping the beat for you.
I'm leaving a review.
That's it.